So during this last year, since the pandemic started, we have seen dramatic changes in the way community engagement has occurred throughout the United States. Most of our interactions have become virtual, and thus that most common form of direct service participation in community work, interacting with people on an individual, personal level, have been pretty challenging. We do have now virtually Zoom tutoring, after school programs, but we have also seen an incredible movement for racial justice this past year, moments of political instability, economic hardship, especially in our communities of color, that have pulled huge numbers of people into movements for social change work. All of these factors have resulted in our office, the Center for Community Engaged Learning, looking beyond direct service work to other ways to be involved and make social change. Hence this event, Ways to Social Change, our first in a series of workshops. This month, our theme is on educate. Educating can mean educating yourself on the impacts of your actions on social institutions, educating others on issues that impact them and their communities, educating lawmakers and public officials about issues you care about.
So to start, we're going to invite everybody to look at how the ways that they have individually participated in social change or the ways that they would like to participate in social change. Using the social change wheel, which is a tool you may have heard of. They use it at lots of college campuses, but it allows us to evaluate our own positions in social change. So we're going to watch a quick introduction. Okay, can everybody see that?
Change Wheel is a framework developed by Minnesota Campus Compact more than 20 years ago. This model has served to help students, staff, faculty, and others consider the different ways to create social change and how they fit together with the work of higher education. Over the years, it has been used as a tool for facilitation, reflection, education, and planning. This is just one way to explore the different ways to social change. Not everything fits perfectly into a category. Some things fit into more than one category and some in none. What's important is to think critically about how all these contribute to social change. Working towards social change looks different to everyone, and this can be a tool to help us see how we are part of a bigger picture.
Okay, so to start, if everybody can look at this list that we have up here, there are quite a few things on it, but if you can go through and think to yourself about what your top two activities would be that you believe contribute to social change. And if you've already done this activity before, we invite you to do it again and see what has changed about your views of social change, especially over the last year, as we've seen so many changes just politically and everything. So go ahead and read through that. I'll give us about 2 or 3 minutes to do that. And then we'll move on to our next thing. If anybody is having trouble seeing that, we're also going to have a link in the chat so that you can pull it up on your own computer. We'll take about 30 more seconds. Okay, and then we're going to do one more test to everybody's eyesight. And hopefully you'll be able to find the category that you chose as your top one, or the statement that you chose as your top way to get involved in social change under one of these categories. So as everybody starts looking at that, we're going to throw another link in the chat where you can go ahead and answer a poll about what was your top choice for community involvement. What category did it fall under? Oops, sorry. I'm starting to see people's answers start to come in here. So we'll wait a few more minutes and then I'll share with you guys who we have with us and what people are interested in learning about. Okay, I'll go ahead and share. And you can keep filling out the poll if you're working on it. But otherwise, here are the answers that we have so far. So lots of people who either are involved or want to get involved in voting and formal political activity, community building, raising public awareness of social issues, and a few on community organizing. So hopefully that information is at least interesting to you. The point of the social change wheel is to show how important all of the different aspects of the social change wheel are to creating social change. And as Laurel said, what we're really focused on with these events is moving away from direct service because it's just not something that's super accessible right now, and moving into some of the other categories and the other ideas that we have. So today, since we're focusing on advocacy, just some other things that are a part of advocacy. Supporting an idea or cause through public or private communications, collecting evidence to support your opinion and then sharing that evidence with others, sharing research or a video that highlights the inequities in your community on social media, calling and writing letters to elected officials, telling your peers why an issue matters to you, and influencing public policy through official channels. And there are other ideas outside of that, but those are the ones that we came up with and the ones that most directly align under advocacy on our social change wheel. And so hopefully that gives you just a little bit of an overview of what advocacy is and what it means. And we are going to go ahead and jump into our community partner conversation with Michael Dahl. So we're going to go ahead and first share a video. We have done an interview with Michael before, so we're going to go through a little bit of the video talking about what Homeline is and what he does and what advocacy is, and then he'll give us a little bit of an introduction into advocacy, okay?
So I'm Michael Dahl, and I'm the Public Policy Director with Homeline, which means usually I'm working on issues before the state legislature or working with the governor's office on things that would improve the lives of tenants through changes in laws that sort of put a more even balance between tenants and landlords in the legal sphere. we equip tenants with the resources that they need to be able to represent themselves in court when they have issues with their landlord. We also do propose ways that they can negotiate with their landlord on issues so things don't have to go to court. And all of this is done through what is actually primarily a program that the program we're most known for, which is a tenant hotline. Tenants can actually contact Homeline to receive free legal confidential advice, and we advise over 15,000 tenants each year. This year has been a sort of a more difficult year because of COVID, where we've had to pass along some information that is a little more in depth than just the usual legal ins and outs, but how to handle that situation with a pandemic going on. We also do organizing with tenants. So if there are building-wide issues that people need to have addressed, like they all don't have heat, and they need to work to get the landlord to follow through and provide some basic service, we'll organize with tenants on issues like that. We teach people, police officers, students, social workers, if they need to be kept up to date on what tenant landlord law is, we work on that. And then there's the public policy work that I do. The hotline is the one that I really want to point out, that as many students are renters, if you have an issue that you need advice on, call our tenant hotline and you'll get the help of a lawyer or a law student that's been trained on how to answer questions that you need help on. First of all, advocacy is when you work on issues that impact a lot of people and you want to change policy to better represent your needs. So it's not the one-on-one counseling that our lawyers do. It's not education. It's actually going to the Capitol or doing a Zoom meeting with your legislator and telling them your story. Your story is what gets them to be concerned about, well, this might be the concern of other folks in my community as well. And maybe it turns into more meetings with other folks as well. But it really is the direct experience of constituents, that advocacy that asks for something to change in law to help make real improvements in their lives. And that all starts by connecting with constituents like students at the U who may feel like they deserve better housing conditions or they have an issue with their landlord. So that's what advocacy is when people band together and they ask for something bigger, better than what the current law provides. Students are, and I have involved students in campaigns where we got $100 million devoted to affordable housing. It was with a different organization at that time, but a lot of folks in a big coalition were asking for this. And the 3 interns I was supervising had a dramatic impact. They helped my organization and me be more creative and more effective when we did our advocacy at the Capitol, because they were able to do work that I simply couldn't. And when I do an internship with someone, I do a beginning, middle, and end. They take a project from beginning to end so they can put it on their resume and say, I want to do this in the future. Advocacy has changed. If you think of this country's history, it's by organizing and advocacy that major changes have happened on everything from Social Security to food stamp programs to the war on poverty and the other things that were involved with that. It happened because people banded together, said they had a common interest, and then they demanded changes from their legislators and were able to make that happen. And students actually have been at the forefront at a number of those issues because you sort of have a little bit of the luxury of time, a little bit of the know-how that you can get when you're at school, and also just this connection between classes and programs outside in the community that sort of make for an education to be a more enriching experience.
So as he mentioned in the video, Michael is the public policy director at Homeline, which is a tenant advocacy organization in the Twin Cities. He works on a state and local level to increase renters' rights and improve access to affordable housing. And he brings a wide variety of experiences to his work in social justice, including working for the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, the Minnesota Food Charter Network, the Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative, and the Minnesota Public Interest Research Project. And he's here to share all of that information and experience with us today. He's going to start by just talking to a little bit about advocacy, but please be thinking of questions, be thinking of comments, anything you want to ask Michael, because we will have time for question and answers before we go into breakout rooms. So Michael, if you want to take it away.
Okay, my first question that I'm going to ask people is who wants to feel more powerful than they already are? Raise your hand if you want to feel more powerful than you already are. Okay, some of you have your pictures up and others don't, but I'm seeing more hands than I usually do, and that's good. Power means you're more capable than you are at this moment. And I want to talk to you all about ways that you can sort of increase your power if you haven't already done this by working to contact your legislator and band together with others who have a common interest as yours to make changes in law that make your life better. But before I talk about how to be powerful, I'm going to say that there are some days, even as a public policy director for Homeline, where I don't feel that powerful. And I'm always reminded of this story. I was noted that I used to work at the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. And I remember this experience I had when a street outreach worker called me up and he said, Michael, you're never going to believe what just happened. There was this issue that was happening at a shelter. And he said, David, this homeless guy, while we all stood on our hands, this homeless guy went and talked to the mayor and he made a major change happen. And I'll just tell you a little bit about it. There was a Stanley Cup was happening in St. Paul a number of years ago, which I think is like the Pro Bowl for hockey. And I think the Ice Castle was happening. And so there's lots of tourists coming into St. Paul. And sometimes people who are homeless would hang out in the skyways to stay warm. But the mayor didn't want homeless people hanging out in the skyways with all the tourists coming around. And so a bunch of these people who didn't want to be outside, the shelter the drop-in center that they had just come from was being converted into a shelter at night. Basically, drop-in centers would have lots of tables and places people could eat. And then it would have to switch over to a shelter where they would have mats on the floor. And while all this was happening, everybody had to leave the building. So there'd be a bunch of homeless folks standing outside in the cold. And David, this man named David, just figured he was going to get a bunch of his friends and they were going to go into the Skyway anyway and sit there. And he didn't know anything about organizing. He wasn't doing direct action organizing in his mind. He was just like, I want to be warm. And a security guard came along and said, you know what, you got to leave. The mayor doesn't want you here, or something like that. And David said, well, what do you have us do? And David was told, well, maybe you should grab a cup of coffee someplace. And so they all gathered their money and they got a cup of coffee and one newspaper and were sitting together with one another. And a security guard came along again and said, you know, you've got to move. There's people who need these seats and you just got to get out of here. And the security guard told David that if the issue that he was concerned about was so important, maybe he ought to go talk to the mayor. The next day came around and he brought his 10 friends and they walked into the mayor's office and they said, they went through this whole rigmarole about how they did not want to be outside in the cold. And the mayor went up to the staff and said to his staff, you fix this. And within 30 minutes, they had called some foundations, and they found the resources to hire more staff so that it would take a less amount of time to actually flip from being a daytime drop-in center to an overnight shelter. So they only had to be outside for about 10 minutes as opposed to about an hour. And whenever I'm feeling powerless, I think David got the mayor's attention and made this amazing thing happen. So I like it when people say they want to feel more powerful. I like it when people sort of think of examples of when they've been powerful, what sort of change that's helped them accomplish. And so I want to share a little bit about the way that you can make a difference. And it's not going to be talking to the mayor. It can be talking to the mayor. It can be talking to your state legislator. It can be trying to find a way to talk to the governor. But what do you want? I'm going to be asking, presenting on some things that you need to do if you want to make a bigger difference with an elected official. And so I'm going to do a little corny thing here, and I'm going to ask everybody, if you're not willing to turn on your video, to at least turn on your microphones. I want to see the microphones light up, please. Take yourself off mute. Okay, now I want you all to say, "I am the expert."
I am the expert.
I'm the expert.
I'm the expert.
I'm the expert.
Okay. When you're talking with your legislator, you are a constituent that adds a story, something that makes it so that you show that you care about an issue. Maybe it's because of something you're doing directly in the community, that you do direct service, for example, and you know some of the issues that are faced by people who are struggling with poverty. Maybe there's, there could be a wealth of different civically minded issues that you know about. You may have read a story in the newspaper and it motivated you into thinking that you want to make for change in your community so that issue could get better for your community. And so you have a story, and no one can say that that story is not true. You are the expert on the story that you have and the thing that you want to have changed. So the next thing, and all the mute buttons I hope will go off. I want you to repeat after me. Legislators are people.
Legislators
are people.
Legislators are people.
Legislators are people.
Okay, now anybody want to say, why would I ask that? Why would I say that?
I'll go.
Just like all of us.
What's that?
Because they're just like all of us.
And how are they just like all of us?
They have a story to tell and they're trying to impact change, just like we have a story to tell and are hoping to impact change.
Yep, that's certainly, that's a high level like way that they're just like us. They also, I often say, the legislators or governors, or before people sort of became these powerful people that they were teachers and they were nurses and they were, they used to rent an apartment when they were younger perhaps, and they're just like everybody else. They have some of the same motivations that we do. It's just that they have a little bit more power in certain circles than we do. And a thing that I often say is that people love to be loved and hate to be hated. And so a good advocate is going to want an elected official to want to hear what they have to say. So, I often say my job, I know there's times where I need to get some legislators a little angry at me because I'm going to say things they disagree with, but more often than not, I want legislators to love to hear what I have to say about how they can be so powerful that they can make a meaningful difference in their communities' lives. Okay. The next thing is I'm going to ask folks to repeat and take yourself off mute. And if you could just say, admit what you don't know.
Admit what you don't know.
No.
Okay, and can I get anybody to tell me why that might be an important thing?
It's important because if you can't acknowledge something that you don't know, how could you learn?
Okay.
It's a part of being accountable.
It's a part of being accountable. Yes, definitely. And policymakers, if they like to listen to what you say and you tell them something that's not completely true, they're not going to come to you anymore. So admitting that you don't know something is actually a very good idea, because you can tell that legislator or that policymaker of some sort, you're going to help get the answer for them. That you are going to invest enough of your time into this relationship that you're not just going to ask for them to do something, but if you don't know the answer to something, you're going to find someone else who can answer that question and bring them to the next time that you have a conversation with them, or to just gather that information and provide it for a policymaker. Next thing, all those mute buttons come off and say, ask if they support your pitch.
Ask if they support your pitch.
Does anybody know what I'm trying to get at there?
In a way, I think when you ask them that, it makes them now have to take a stance, and it makes them accountable if they don't do anything. Because if they admit they support you, they don't have any reason to not take action.
That is huge. That is sort of like the ultimate thing, is that we want to hold them accountable to something, and that they actually have shown that they care enough about the issue that you care about, and they're going to take a stance on it, do something public to create change. Another reason why it's important to ask if they support your pitch is that I've seen a lot of people go into meetings with policymakers, and they love to talk, and they're like, oh, you got to work on this issue, and here's why I care about it, and there's all these people that are impacted, and they talk for like 20 or 30 minutes about why this is such an important issue, and then they leave and they feel so powerful that they got to talk to this policymaker about this issue they care about, and they left the office, and they left before they had any idea on if the legislator also supported them in the issue. So it's really important that you balance out your time when you're talking with a policymaker. Try to give like about 50% of the time to you actually telling a story and why something matters, and 50% of the time to actually having them talk to you and ask questions about the issue that you care about. Okay, and then the next part, all those mute buttons come off. Come on, I'm going to see a little bit more. And I'm going to say follow through.
Follow through.
Follow through.
Follow through.
Okay, why is that important?
Need to follow through to make change.
It's following through to make change, but what is it following through, let's say, with the person that the elected official you just met with? Why is that important?
I think to like create a relationship.
Okay, bingo, that's number one. To form a relationship, that's key. But the first thing you want to do, if you've met with a policymaker and you've asked them to make a change and you find out why it was important to them, and there's a bunch of intelligence that you gathered, it's really good a day or two later to send them a note. And in that note, you want to say, hello, my name is Claire. We met the other day and I told you why about this issue that we cared about. We asked you if you supported the issue, and you said yes, and this is what you were going to do to actually help make some change. And if you, in writing that letter, you've reminded them of the commitments they made to you. And at the end, you might say, and in a couple of weeks, I'd like to see where are things at. So you form this relationship with a policymaker, and you get them to make a commitment to you, and you check back to see if they've actually made that possible. Okay. Now, I want to reserve a lot of time for questions and answers. But first I need to say that on a college campus, you're in a unique experience that not many of us can naturally find ourselves in. On a college campus, there are tons of student organizations that have different civic-minded causes, right? And you can find ones that people agree with you. You want to get together with them. You have an automatic community of people who want to create change. You have an automatic group of people who can learn about how to make change together. And you might come from different places. So what I often say is there are 201 legislators at the Capitol, and I need to find a way to get 50% plus one of them to agree with what I have to say. And that means that I need to find people who live in different communities, but have a shared interest. And you can get that on a college campus because people are from everywhere across the state, in their hometowns. And you can talk to many more legislators than me as a lobbyist. I'll actually tell you that you hold more power than I do as a lobbyist. I can get into some of the rooms and talk with legislators about why we need to increase tenant protections. But if you're a constituent And you can say, you know what? My landlord entered into my apartment without getting my approval first. And that really concerns me. That story that story that you can tell around that issue is something that's going to be a lot more powerful than if I had shared it, because it didn't happen to me. It didn't happen in my rental unit. And they'll have to listen to you. They'll have to listen to you and make a commitment to something they're going to do to try to make something like that less possible, less forgivable in the future, let's say. We've, at Homeline, the organization that I work for, we actually get a lot of stories from tenants where a landlord, and many landlords are great. I don't want to tarnish landlords, but there are some landlords out there that aren't the best. They don't really follow the rules that well. And they may come into someone's apartment with little to no notice, and they've actually entered in when someone was sleeping. And if you can figure out how vulnerable you'd feel in that sort of situation, at Homeline, we're trying to change the law that actually says how much notice do you need to have before a landlord can enter into your home, and so that you can feel safe. So in any case, college campuses, again, unique places where lots of people can gather and talk about issues like this, figure out how they want to make change, and get a big swath of Minnesota covered, because there are people that come from your campus from all around. And if you try to make connections with them, you can really make a huge difference. I've been a lobbyist for 23 years now. I became executive director for the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless 3 years after I graduated from college. I had no idea what I was doing, but I became a lobbyist, and I got to be a part of some huge changes where we got more investments in housing, affordable housing programs, ways to get people into emergency shelter when they needed shelter. And I did it all the time by, again, talking with constituents first who cared about these issues. I'm going to stop there. I want to see if there's any questions or questions I can answer, or concerns that you have, and help you sort of brainstorm ways you can impact the world around you. So is this the time for questions, Ava?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions.
There is one question in the chat that was asked about when you were talking about sending a reminder of your meeting with the legislator. Do legislators still like paper, or do you just send an email? Is one more effective?
Well, a handwritten note, nothing's more effective than a handwritten note. Okay. And so I would say that would be the first. An email, as long as it's not like it's something that was a cookie cutter email, but is instead exactly what your thoughts and feelings are, is pretty darn effective as well. Phone calls can be helpful, only legislators then have to remember what was said. That's why something that's written is a lot more, carries a lot more weight. And then some of the mass sort of petitions or postcard campaigns where they all say the same thing, they're not quite as effective as things that have a personal touch. Yeah. But if email is the way you communicate, in fact, you can ask the legislator, what's the way the best way to get to get in contact with you? And if they say, send me an email, then send them an email. If they say, let's talk on the phone in a couple of weeks, you can also do that. But you want to communicate in a way that you and that other person feel comfortable communicating in the future.
So there are a few other questions here. What is the timeline for an average process of advocating on an issue? Like, how long does it take?
I'm going to use Minnesota as an example and say that each year there's either a 3-month or a 5-month session where things happen within that time frame, and most of the results come at the very, very end. So if you need some planning, and this is one reason why I think schools are, college campuses are really helpful, is that you can often spend your time educating yourself in the first semester, and then use the second, how they break down. Use the fall semester to educate yourself, and use the winter semester as a chance to actually work at the legislature on issues that you care about. So doing your work in advance, planning a campaign, and then after that, getting something changed to the Capitol. Usually takes 3 to 5 months.
Okay. So there's a few other questions in the chat. One of them sort of been addressed by another person, but
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and ask you your opinion. How often do legislators actually see the cards and emails? I've heard most of them actually don't reach the actual legislator. But that was mostly in the context of national government. One of the other people said, I'm actually a legislative assistant, and part of our work is to check all the emails and document them into a database.
Yes, a lot. For issues that are, well, there are a lot of people calling and sending notes. Sometimes a legislative assistant will sort of check for and against on a particular issue so they can report the numbers to their boss.
Mhm.
But I would say that, if a letter or a individual email has come across that is heartfelt and made personal, that your legislator is going to see that pretty widely. If it's a form letter, there's a chance that some of those won't get seen by a legislator, but they'll be counted in that tally about how many people are for a particular issue and how many people are against a particular issue. But again, the personal touch things, I think they usually see.
Great. Okay, we have another question. What tips do you have people who would like to start a career in public policy?
Matters, when you mean public policy, do you mean become an elected official? Or do you mean to get involved in lobbying on issues? If that person
I think
could
it would
type
be
a
the
little bit
second
more.
one.
The second one,
What's that?
lobbying on issue. What
Lobbying.
you're doing right now, yeah.
So when I was in college, you have to put a couple of years of grunt work in. But if you do that, I became a lobbyist the year after I graduated from college, because when I was on college campus, I got deeply involved in a particular issue, and I got known by the community as someone who cared about these issues. And so I ended up getting hired by an advocacy organization. In the first couple of years, I wasn't a really great advocate. It took a while to learn things. But like I said, I became the director for the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless a few years after college, which that's a whole nother story about how that happened, but I was also their lead lobbyist. And the way you do it, the amount of time isn't as important as the way you do it. Show that you care by belonging to groups that work on like-minded issues. Put yourself in a place where you can accept responsibility for doing certain tasks that organization is responsible for. And then ask your supervisor that you're working with if you can go to some of the meetings where the community of lobbyists get together to talk about how doing a strategy, a set of strategies on making for social change to happen. And if you stick with it, within a few years, you actually can be doing some pretty impactful work. Another route you can take to doing that is like this legislative assistant. I don't know. I don't know who the person is, but if you're a legislative assistant, you get to learn a lot about the legislative process. And if you're interning for a particular office, you get to learn a lot about that office. And I know a legislative assistant who, when I first knew him, he was a legislative assistant. And within a number of years, he was actually in a leadership position at the Minnesota House of Representatives, which what that taught me is never treat the staff poorly, because someday they may actually be able to have a meeting with you or not.
Great.
Great. I think we're going to go ahead and move into breakout rooms because we do want people to be able to connect with each other on ideas for advocacy or what they're working on right now. So I am going to quick share my screen so that we can look at how to use Jamboard. Has anyone used Jamboard in the past? I'll just go ahead and show everybody anyway. So basically, you already have the link to this, but we'll send it in the chat again. And you can just add sticky notes to this page, and then we will be able to see what everybody was talking about in their breakout room, and then I'll be able to send this out afterwards as a resource. So I am going to send some prompts in the chat so everybody knows what they are welcome to talk about, but if your conversation goes off of this, do not worry about that at all. And we are excited to hear what everybody has to say. Okay, so I'm going to send the questions. And then I'll send everybody into breakout room. So we'll see you in a little bit. And everybody will be able, hopefully you've made some connections so you can talk to other people about their advocacy work. We also have a website, so you'll get the link to that, and you might have already gotten it in the earlier email, but we have information on there about scholar profiles, so people who have been doing a lot of advocacy work at the University of Minnesota, and then we have other resources of people doing interesting advocacy work through art and things like that. I also want to let you know that we do have a date set for our next event. It's Tuesday, March 23rd, and it'll be during the same time. And we're going to send you a feedback survey, and that has ideas for the topic of the next event. So please share your ideas, share your feedback on the ideas that we have on there, and then share your feedback about this event as well. Okay. And it looks like someone said they didn't have enough time to finish talking, so you are welcome to stay in here and talk afterwards if you want to keep talking to people and keep connecting with people. Is there anything else that I missed, Laurel, that you want to add?
No. Yeah, just please respond to our survey. It's going to help us guide what we do next. We have some ideas for next month's event, but we'd like some more feedback to tip us one way or another. So
yeah. And thank you so much, Michael, for sharing all of your expertise. I think everybody really enjoyed it. I for sure learned a lot about advocacy that I didn't know before. And we will also be sending out Michael's email in case you want to connect with him specifically about volunteering or interning with Homeline. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.